Hi, my name is Lizzie Goldsmith, and I'm the creator of this dramatic audio adaptation of Addie Zierman's memoir, When We Were on Fire. Episode 2 will be out next week, but in the meantime, I'm excited to share this conversation I had with Addie and Aria Sivick, who voiced Addie in the audio drama. We're going to be debriefing each episode as it comes out, and so today we're talking shiny happy people, toxic relationships, and what it was like for Addie to have her story adapted in this way. And just a heads up, we do talk about episode 1 in depth, so if you haven't heard it yet, you may want to give it a listen before diving into this conversation. Enjoy! Hi, I'm Lizzie Goldsmith. Welcome to this bonus episode of the When We Were on Fire audio drama. I am here with author Addie Zierman. Hi, Addie.
Hi.
And Aria Sivick, our voice actor who portrayed Addie. Hi, Aria.
Hello.
So it is so surreal, all of us being here. We haven't all been together since 2019. So reconnecting is so much fun. So just briefly, want to recap episode 1, which we released last week. That covered part 1 of the book, the story of Addie, your story of growing up kind of on fire for God in the Chicago suburbs. We start with this childhood conversion, and then we jump to high school. And, there's this big focus on your relationship with Chris at the time. And, it's all about becoming a missionary and just kind of this, it's called Obsessed in the book. And we called the episode that, and that really kind of shapes that episode. But I guess before we really get into talking about this particular episode, I just want to talk a little bit about how this project started, because it's such a unique story and a cool story. Because I know I was trying to remember, Addie, like when I started reading your blog and when I found you, and because we met in 2014. And I had been reading your blog for a while. I think in 2013, replied to some emails, done some like blog syncs when your books are coming out. And was just very struck by some similarities with my life. And, it was it was right making that connection. But I never thought at the time I'm going to make an audio drama. But long story short, I kind of did make that decision when I went to grad school, and I grew up with, goodness, there's a lot I could talk about here, but I grew up with, audio dramas, a lot of Christian audio dramas. And there was kind of a point where I was like, you know what, I thought I'm going to make some poetry soundscapes or something. Like, and then I was like, I'm going to regret it if I leave grad school and I don't do something big. And I brought your book with me to grad school. Someone had asked me going into this, like, was there a particular passage or a particular, part of the book that made you like, oh, this is what I want to adapt? And I was really trying to remember. I wasn't really journaling at that time. But I think there was several reasons. I had done a soundscape the first semester about like what it sounds like to blank. There's like a blank section there, your faith, and kind of exploring a lot of those feelings of loss. And I always was kind of fascinated and really resonated with kind of stories of deconstruction, stories of faith evolution, like my own and other people's. And it just felt like, and your book is so, in a way, like cinematic. Like there's a lot of scenes in there. There's a lot of like movement and even though it's obviously from your perspective, it just was very related. I don't know. I just was like, I want to do that. This is doable. And so I reached out to you, and it was my year of grad school. It was Aria's senior year of college. This is a big project. But yeah, I had the idea of having a listening party, and we'll talk more about that, I think, later on. And I was like, oh, like I should invite Addie, but like, she'll probably won't be able to come at short notice. And so I invited, and then you were able to come, and that was just a lovely experience to share that with you.
Yeah,
but
it was cool.
Yeah, so it's like a really, really fast backstory as well. And, Aria, we were in a voiceover class together, and
yes.
That's
Tina
how
Perkins.
sort of
Shout out to Tina Perkins.
Tina Perkins, who is also our professor, who's also in this audio drama. I wanted to kind of transition out into talking about like kind of the themes of the book and the themes of this first part, especially. Um, and we'll get into the audio drama and the adaptation and the story, but I kind of want to go back to the writing of the book, Addie, and just like writing your story. And this is, your story that we've adapted. How did writing that help you process growing up on fire for God?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's been really a long time since I wrote this book. I wrote it in grad school, and I didn't particularly intend to write it. I think, I went into grad school. I had kind of found memoir and creative nonfiction at the end of my undergraduate degree. And then we went to China, and then I came home, and maybe a year after that, I started grad school. And my grad school time really kind of dovetailed, with some of the harder subject matter in that book. And I think because I had gone to school specifically to write memoir, I had to really confront it, like there was nothing else in my life to write about. That was it. My whole life was defined by this evangelical upbringing and this kind of deep grief over loss of church and loss of identity in those spaces. And I had papers due. I had pieces due, and so it just started kind of coming out. And I think it was just a really it was a really good thing that I was in that space when I started having that breakdown, because it forced me to process it. And obviously with therapy and with other resources, but in the writing of it, I was able to kind of move through it and eventually make some meaning from it.
Mm.
So,
yeah, no, I definitely resonate with writing as finding meaning of your own story. Been there definitely a lot, and your writing has definitely been a point of relating for me, as I've said, but also lots of other readers over the years. What did you imagine back then that others would connect with your story the way they have?
I mean, I think I was really surprised in grad school, specifically how many people in my classes were connecting with it, because there's so few people who grew up like I did in, a grad school like Hamlin, which is where I went. But it feels like a lot of people have versions of religious trauma. And I think maybe the deep themes are pretty relatable to a lot across, whether it's an evangelical situation or a different, faith tradition. I think a lot of those themes kind of are universal.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of universality, I think, for sure. Um, and so, kind of bringing us into the audio drama. What was it like having your book adapted into an audio drama?
Yeah, I mean, it was strange. It's like I want to say this carefully, because you did such a beautiful job. You did such a beautiful job. I just listened to it again yesterday, really for the first time since the screening. And I was on my way to a baby shower, just, weeping in my car, listening to
Aw.
it. And I didn't really expect that. So, you both, like Lizzie, the way you kind of brought it together, and some of the artistic choices you made. I mean, I think, Carl, adapting a book into anything else is really hard, especially a memoir with so much like exposition and internal dialogue, internal narration, that you can't really bring to the, to a drama situation. But the choices you made really brought a lot of that stuff forward, which was incredible. And Aria, you were just so lovely. And I think I said this to you at the screening about how it helped me to feel a little bit different kind of tenderness towards my past self, when she had a different voice, and I could hear her and, feel compassion for her in a way that I can't always feel when I look at my own. Yeah. So there was a lot of beauty in it, but also there's a big awareness of like, oh, she didn't put in that part or, this is missing or, I sound like such an asshole because there's no context for this, but there's so much, so there's some of that too. Like, it's just a very strange experience of listening to a thing that I didn't make, but is made from what I made. It's very surreal. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's both, but it's beautiful work and I'm glad it's in the world. So.
I mean, surreal, I think it's for all of us, knowing that it's a true story, right? And you have like you, and then there's the character view, and then there's Aria's portrayal, and it's all, yeah. And I just reread the book, kind of while I was revisiting the audio and making sure everything was sounding good, and just, I was like, each part, I decided to adapt each part into its own episode, and but some part, the first part is very long, and the episode is the same. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there was, I'm very, you had to, like, there's just like cuts, and I was just like, oh, and this is just so, I was thinking at the time, like, oh, it would have been nice to have pulled this in, and like, definitely, how I adapted it is certainly not the only way it could have been adapted. There's so many, anyone could have listened and gone all these different directions. But you mentioned like, it being a lot of internal stuff. Like that was an early decision I made of like, do I have a narrator?
Right.
Do I like have it like there be like a journal entry sort of framing of that? And I kind of was like, you know what, I want to see if I can do it without.
Yeah. And you did. And you did a lot of really creative, just workarounds that I thought were really cool. But, I looked this morning at the Audible audiobook, and it's 8 hours and 1 minute. And your adaptation, is it less than an hour altogether?
It's about 90 minutes.
Okay.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's big difference. So you lose, so, the choices you made were great. But there's also, it's the tip of the iceberg of, what's also in the book.
Yes, and so. I do hope people who listen who don't know the book that they will find the book and read it. I know I have a friend recently who has found both. She was really interested in the project. She read your book and then she listened to the audio drama and just really loved both. And it was great hearing her perspective as someone who was able to like have that input and have that like fresh approach related to the content and the story. And so I hope other people do the same.
Yeah, me too. It's a very cool project.
Yes, so meaningful. But Aria, I want to bring you in because you are such a vital part of this story, right? It's a memoir. We spend so much time together recording, and I mentioned it was a busy time in school for both of us. So what made you interested in taking on this role?
I mean, it kind of goes back to early roots, right, of performance and theater, in that initial interest in voice acting at all. And through a complicated stream of events, growing up and all that fun stuff, I pivoted from a career in musical theater, but I still held on to that love of performing. And having taken a voiceover class in sophomore year of my high school career as a theater major, because I went to a performing arts high school, I remembered how awesome that unit was, and it just kind of always stayed in the back of my mind, like, oh, hey, like, I think that I felt good doing that. And that kind of, and different than the way I felt on stage. But, you're 16 and you go, okay, that was cool, moving on. And then, when you pursue a field that is different from your heart's passion, right, that that is a part of your core being, even though you might be passionate about your field, like there is always something in you that keeps the cogwork going. And I think when I saw Tina Perkins' class Art of Voiceover pop up, especially in that it was going to qualify as a graduating credit for me. That was the easiest decision ever, and it was such a trek getting up and down that Syracuse hill every day from the theater department and the bowels of of campus. But and I say that endearingly, but it was just awesome to even just dip the toe back in and find a way that, you could pursue something performative and theatrical and aligned with your passions, adjacent to, what you're doing to graduate, and hopefully make a career out of. So Lizzie, when we connected in Tina's class, and you had pitched your idea for your graduate project, I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because we share a background, right, of how we grew up loving audio drama, right? Focus on the Family and Paws and Tales, Adventures in Odyssey, Lamplighter Theater. Like I in my dad's Toyota Sienna grew up listening to those little cassette tapes, like, and on the radio. And they were just so high quality and so engaging and so capturing. And it also, it did align with what my parents were trying to ingrain in me from a faith perspective. So I think that we had such a strong connection and bond initially over that when you announced your project and that you were holding auditions, it scratched both itches for me. It scratched that nostalgia of audio drama, and that is so where I feel I really want to go in terms of a performing perspective. And then also that, like, I remember audio drama and it has like this place in my heart of growing up. And also then Addie's story I was captured by the book. Absolutely, because it is so relatable, especially to young women growing up in sheltered places like churches that are supposed to be safe and and warm in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways they aren't, right? You can, and it complicates your journey from a very early point. But anyways, that was a roundabout way of saying, of just, that's where my passion started, and then that's what brought me and attracted me to the project. And many Chipotle nights in the booth followed after that. So
yeah, another audio drama connection. I definitely have a little more complicated feelings now about some of those Christian radio dramas, but they hold like a special place in my heart, because they, like Aria said, they had such a, high quality, but they also, audio drama is such an intimate medium. You may not see the person's face, but you feel like you know them. And I would not be working in audio if it weren't for some of these audio dramas that really, kind of connected me with these characters in cool ways. So yeah, it was glad to have that experience and that connection too. Like what are the odds that I would find someone who just like connected with in that way? But Aria, what did you do to prepare for this role?
I think I leaned, because I had been studying theater, but more, from a technical perspective, like lighting design. I just think I leaned into those roots in terms of analysis and what that takes, and how I would traditionally break down a script or break down a story, right, or a play. I definitely applied it to the book and your script and your writing, Lizzie, and but also dually leaning into that early acting training, right? Like, and that had been a long time since I had done that, and it felt very liberating. And I think that adrenaline that spooled from that was what really drove me to deeply dive in and dig in and contribute and give what I, like my full attention and energy to that role, because Addie, it's a very dynamic, it's a very dynamic role. And especially since it spanned, a lifetime, like a small lifetime, like it was very, and spanning from heavy themes to, to kind of tranquil moments. Like it really was a great range to dig into. So I think that that's kind of what I did to prepare. And also I was giving great direction in sessions through Lizzie as well. That's always so important. right? And when you're in the studio, I really do lean on direction, and seeing where in good direction, I feel will always spawn like multiple choices and multiple options, right? Like it leaves that door, what is being asked of you, but it's so clear that you feel enabled to make other bolder choices, and I think that's what can result in some really organic takes.
Yeah, it was a great time in the studio. I had never really directed before, at least not, audio drama, and that was a neat experience. And I did try to not to get too much into behind the scenes, but I did try to like have actors together as much as possible, because I think you can get such more natural reactions from that, and just had great experiences in the studio. But I guess that kind of leads into, finally this first episode, and kind of where it all starts. And I'm curious, for either of you, both of you, what moments particularly stand out from this first episode?
I mean, I love the where it all starts, right? The meeting at the pole and the praying, like just because that's where I remember going into my middle school and praying and praying at the pole, like on those early mornings. And I think that was a great kickoff to the whole what is now going to be released as an episodic series. So I think that was a standout for me of like where it all began. I always, my friend, it's always a joke of like when you become like self-aware, when like you start having like vivid memories of life, right? And I think that was cool to kind of play into that for the first part of episode 1.
And that is where the book starts too. And it just felt like an important, like such a vivid moment from the book, that like having that as essentially the beginning. I mean, kind of there's that childhood conversion scene at the very, very beginning, and then it transitions into See You at the Pole, which I never actually did because I went to a Christian school, so we didn't do that. But I actually know you had that experience, Aria. But yeah, it felt like an important moment to preserve. And I mean, I'll come back to like kind of scenes that stood out to you, Addie. But what made you want to start your story with See You at the Pole?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think, the first year I went to high school as a freshman, and I went to See You at the Pole, and I was like, look at all these Christians, look at all these Christians. This is so amazing. And then, I started getting, it was that fall that I started kind of hanging out with Chris a lot. And he was featured in the newspaper at his, See You at the Pole. He was leading it. And he was like, I feel like in the book, or in the audio drama in this episode 1, you really get the sense of what a tool he was. But you kind of miss, and I don't know if I even captured in the book, just how like freaking dynamic he was. And he was like, you just wanted him to shine his light on you. And, he's in this newspaper in this grainy black and white, and he is just looking like the coolest guy, and he's leading this. All the people are kind of blurred out, but there he is in the middle with his Bible. And just so looking up to that, so wanting him to see something in me, so wanting to be that kind of person in my own school, both to belong, but also to stand out. Those two kind of dueling desires, especially for me. I'm an Enneagram type 4, so like I want to be different and special, but I also desperately want to belong. So it was both of those things. And I think I got there, and there was this sense that I am so serious about my faith. I'm going to be the only one out here in the rain, and I don't care because I love God that much. And that part of that was true, but part of that was like, I want to be like Chris. I want to be that standout person in the newspaper article who cares so much. And then, the realization that in my desire to be the best Christian, the most Christian-y Christian, just standing in the rain, I had missed the actual gathering, which was happening inside. And, that has stayed with me over the years. Like, the ways that we miss the belonging because we're so certain that, you know, this is the way to be. So
yeah, definitely. Addie, were there scenes that stood out to you from this episode?
I mean, I really loved the way that the friendship with Kim and Alyssa is captured just really throughout the whole thing. It was such a grounding relationship for me, in that they were like so in it with me, you know, all the way through, and then, you know, they were in the despair with me too, and in the trying to figure it out afterwards with me. So that was cool. Although I will say, the real Alyssa's voice is like a Disney princess voice. Like it sounds like Snow White. So to hear the deeper voice, it was so jarring. I was like, well, that's not Alyssa. That can't possibly be Alyssa. So, but I really loved those scenes and the way you captured those. And I also really liked the way you the waltzing, the dancing, the bit, how you kind of moved back and forth in time. I remember finding the structure for that essay in a class and feeling like I'd found the structure that made the meaning work. And so it was fun to see you carry that through in the audio drama. That was really nice.
Yeah, no, thank you. Those, like, I kind of refer to it as like the dancing montage.
Yes.
And you know, there's several montages throughout, and those are some of the ones like sonically that I really love revisiting, because it's just sort of a way to, how do we do a lot in a short period of time? Yeah. And it was such a great through line too, musically, as well as just, and like picking up on that again. But yeah, no, I really liked the Alyssa and Kim sort of through line as well. And I've definitely thought about it when I've thought about like the community aspect, and where do you find community and who's your support systems, and just, yeah, it was kind of neat to like recreate that a bit in the studio and kind of pull the people in. But yeah, it is interesting because it's like, you know, it's also, I relate a lot to your story, but it's not my you know, it's your life, and these are, you know, I'd met you, but I hadn't met any of these other people.
No, of course not.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating to like, there's this whole other layer too that, like, you know, we both bring so much different to it. But yeah, you had mentioned Chris earlier, and I think that's what I remember most from the listening party in terms of, you know, the few dozen people in the room, the reactions. You know, a lot of them I don't think come from evangelical backgrounds, but I feel like, you know, that, you know, you hear him just being like, oh man, what is, you know, people recognize these kind of unhealthy dynamics, and I remember those being like, oh my gosh, you know, like in the room. And I don't know, I'm like looking back at your high school days, and, you know, this relationship in particular, what would you want to sort of, you know, like there's these iconic, you know, like, do you know what it takes to be a missionary wife and give birth on the floor of a hut in Africa? I mean, that's like kind of
tough.
Yeah, what would you tell your younger self? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, girl, I'm raising a 16-year-old now, so I know my younger self would not have paid me one bit of attention. So let's just start there, because she knew everything. But it is interesting. I think this is a later question, but, you know, the Amazon Prime recently released season 2 of The Shiny Happy People, which is all about teen mania, which, you know, that was his bag. That was what he was into. And when I met him, he had just come back from a 2-month-long, I don't know, teen mania trip. And he was already signed up for the internship at their Honor Academy. And so, you know, I think a lot of that really aggressive talk that he was using with me was stuff that he was hearing from them. And, you know, that was very much the vibe with teen mania. Like, you know, the only real way to be a Christian is to be this missionary, to be this on fire person. And the idea of hell was very dominant in our thinking, and saving people. And I think he was very good at it. I think, when he did go into the internship, I think he was beloved by the upper echelons at Teen Maniac because he just was good at it. And I think, I think he has also done some deconstructing. I don't know. He has blocked me on all of his socials. So I have no idea what's going on with him now. But I think that was probably, he has some trauma there too. And was passing it on in the way that we do when we're young and dumb and trying to figure out how to be people. And so, I guess I don't know what I would say to my younger self. I think my older self has a lot of compassion for her, but also for him, and for what he must have been feeling. And on the one hand, you are, want to date this person, like this person, whatever, think she's cute, but you're in this thing that makes you have all these spiritual layers on top of it. And, or you want to break up, but you don't know how to say it. So you just say it's because of God. So it was toxic, and I did need therapy, and it still creeps up on me, but also I just have a lot more empathy now for it.
Yeah. No, Teen Mania, you mentioned Shiny Happy People. That was so eye-opening because I got like a taste of it reading, but I somehow like dodged that bullet.
Yes.
I know it was still like Acquire the Fire was still very much a thing when I was growing up, but I heard of it. I never went. And there are these scenes in the audio drama. There's an Acquire the Fire when there's some Teen Mania stuff, and at the time, like, and then I watched this audio drama or the show Shiny Happy People, and I was like, oh
yeah, this isn't what I thought it was at all.
This is a lot more intense than I thought it was, and I was
having a little chuckle in the car when I was listening to it because I was like, Ron Luce would be so mad that you put organ music behind his altar call because he was way too cool for that. And like the vocal artist who did the scene was like so straight laced, and he was roaring in on his motorcycle, and he was like riding those emotional waves. So it was a different vibe. But unless you were there, how could you know until you watched the traumatizing season 2? And then now you know.
It is eye-opening. The person who played Ron Luce was actually, I don't know if you know Pete Innes, his brother-in-law.
Oh, really?
His brother-in-law. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
He worked in advancement at Syracuse, and did voiceover as well. So, long story short, I was like, oh my god, like, you want to do this?
Yeah, perfect. I love it. That's a fun connection.
It was a really fun connection to make. But I was like, wow, this is a whole nother ball of wax. And I don't know, like, I can see myself, like, if I had gone to Acquire the Fire, it being because I find my old blog posts from like my early college years of being like, I want to, there was like that theme from your book in those high school years, like, I want to do something great for the Lord, my life be more than just like, normal life sort of thing. And I have those same thoughts and those same like, I don't want that suburban 9 to 5. I want to do some, big things. And, I ended up actually going to China as well mine was a mission trip. And so we'll get into that more in the next episode. But there's all these things about, I think when you grow up evangelical and you kind of have this, it all has to be in this greater purpose, and you kind of look at everything in your life that way, and that can color for better and for worse all your relationships and how you view yourself. But Aria, when we recorded this audio drama, you were closer to high school than Addie and I were your 4 or 5 years, I think, out of high school yourself. Were there parts of Addie's high school experience that resonated with your own experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and actually it's as this was going on, right? Like there was I had a Chris in my life as well. So and eventually, shocker, that didn't last. But that was actually in college. But in high school, the journey was very similar. I did not have that close group of like that girlhood experience, but I did have that with my theater friends and everything. But I also what was very interesting is the theater world can be very different from the church, like the faith world. I was drawing those comparisons like a lot, being like with my theater friends and all the revelry that's implied there, but then going to church on Sunday, and going to choir on Tuesdays, and going on mission trips like to Tennessee to go paint people's decks. Like there was so much of like so many touch points throughout your narrative, Addie, that like I also related to. And similarly, like I think young people are so vulnerable to those emotional highs, especially if you get into contemporary worship. And I still find like the Hillsongs of the world, the Elevations of the world, those are like, intoxicating to a young mind, but you feel so inspired. Like I remember, and also growing up in kind of a religious family, like I was encouraged to start Bible studies and hold that charge, and I would, but then they would fit her out because you're 12. Yeah. And you want to be that soldier, right? Because you're so encouraged, and it's this little incubator, right? Like youth group on Tuesdays. Like I do have really fond memories of some of that girlhood, like touches of that girlhood experience, especially, in those Tuesday youth groups. Like I was fortunate enough to have like really, really talented and gifted adult mentors that did not feel toxic to me at all. Like that felt like they were genuinely there for us girls at that age. But there were a lot of troubling times too, where things started to come into question, especially I did date a lot of the church boys, getting into high school, and it was very interesting, like kind of balancing that with faith. And I know they were on their faith journey as well. So it's interesting when you're going through hormones and when you're being intoxicated by, these passionate messages on Sunday, and then carrying them throughout your week at such a young age, and add to family pressure. It's long story short, like that was just, there were lots of relatable points in your journey. So
yeah, you mentioned the Hillsongs, and I think one of the moments in this episode that like always like just hits me is like that, like the Dominican Republic scene with like the Spanish worship song.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
And like I don't know, it always just like, and it took me a while to like find who was that song, and because like I was really wanting to keep that song in if possible, because it has that familiar kind of quality into it, and it's just like it has that like you feel something when you hear it. At least I do. And I was like, I want to feel something in this song, because like I have lots of feelings about short-term mission trips now, but like they make you feel a certain thing. And like there are certain worship songs now, I think that if I listen to them, I just be like, just want to sit with it for a bit, and then kind of feel first and think later, because it's just song and music and memory is all woven together in a lot of things. But I guess the last question for this part, this episode is, it's you mentioned it's been a bit since you wrote this book. It came out in 2013, and yet there's just a lot that's still relevant more than a decade later. What do you hope people take away from this adaptation of it?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I just hope that people feel seen. And I felt so alone when I was going through all of this. And I think there's, there's a lot more resources out there, and there's a lot more voices kind of speaking to this. When blogs weren't really quite a thing yet when I was going through it. We didn't have the word deconstruction yet that I knew of. So I just didn't know what I was feeling. All I knew is everything that I could depend on was kind of falling apart, and it was so lonely and confusing. And so I hope people feel that they're not alone, and you know, there's a lot of there was a lot of really beautiful things about growing up the way I did, and there was a lot of really hard things, and both of those things can be true. And it takes work to learn to hold them both together, and sometimes it takes periods of time where you're too angry and you can only hold one of them, and that's okay. Like, it's a process.
Thanks for listening to this bonus episode with author Addie Zierman, voice actor Aria Sivick, and me, Lizzie Goldsmith. The music you hear in the background was composed by Frank Sheffield. Stay tuned next week for episode 2 of this dramatic audio adaptation of When We Were on Fire, a memoir of consuming faith, tangled love, and starting over. You can find out more about this production and the book it's based on at whenwewereonfirepodcast.com. And if you want to know more about what it was like for Addie to have her story adapted, check out her Substack. See you next week.